The morning sun bathed the savanna in gold, but hidden beneath the usual chorus of African wildlife, an unexpected story was unfolding. It began with a trapped lion and a black gorilla, guided by instincts no one could have foreseen. The intense sun blazed over the vibrant canopy of the rainforest, where birds chirped and insects buzzed in a relentless rhythm, a familiar soundtrack to the untamed wilderness. In the vast heart of the conservation zone, life thrived freely, governed by nature's fierce and awe-inspiring rules. One morning, John, a veteran ranger with weathered skin and observant eyes, was making his usual rounds. He had dedicated over a decade of his life to this reserve, his love for its wild creatures deeply rooted in his being. On this day, he was surveying areas vulnerable to poachers, those who crept in to steal the soul of the forest. As John moved through a tangled thicket, an unfamiliar sound reached his ears. It wasn't part of the typical forest melody. He froze, listening carefully. A faint, pained cry echoed through the underbrush. Something wasn't right. Guided by instinct, John moved cautiously toward the source of the sound, emerging into a small clearing. What he saw stopped him cold. A baby gorilla, frail and gaunt, lay curled beneath the twisted roots of an old tree. Its jet-black fur was matted, and its wide, wet eyes stared at John with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Nearby, a crude, broken snare told a grim tale. The young one had narrowly escaped a trap, but perhaps its mother hadn't. John stepped forward slowly, speaking softly to calm the frightened creature. In that moment, he knew that only patience and empathy would earn the animal's trust. He lowered himself to the ground, extending his hands with care, giving the gorilla time to adjust to his presence. At first, the baby recoiled, whimpering nervously, but John's gentle voice and kind gaze gradually eased its fear. After a few tense moments, the young gorilla reached out with trembling fingers, brushing against John's hand. A silent bond was formed in that instant, raw, unspoken, and real. John couldn't turn away. He gently lifted the tiny creature, feeling its weak frame quiver in his arms. A quick check revealed only superficial wounds. Grateful for that mercy, John carried the baby back to the ranger station. He named it Kofi, meaning born on Friday in a local dialect. Kofi adapted quickly, cared for with tenderness by John and the team. He was fed, given space to play, and shown the love he had lost. As time passed, he grew stronger. His fur became glossy, his limbs sturdy. He was soon a beloved presence at the station, John's loyal shadow. Kofi often accompanied him on patrols, climbing high into trees to survey the land, alert to danger. He learned to recognize the sound of poachers' engines and would sound alarms when they approached. John, who viewed Kofi as his own, taught him to navigate the forest and read its signals. Kofi responded with fierce loyalty and affection. Together, they became proof of the powerful link between humans and wildlife. 5 years after their first meeting, Kofi had become a robust silverback, wise and strong. He still lived close to the ranger station, often seen interacting with John and the other staff. The sanctuary remained wild and thriving, though poachers remained a constant threat. One blistering afternoon, as John rested from patrol, Kofi appeared, visibly distressed. He tugged at John's arm, letting out strange cries, not his usual calls. John knew something was wrong. Reading the urgency in Kofi's eyes, John got up. The gorilla began leading him deeper into the forest, checking often to ensure John kept pace. Sensing the gravity of the moment, John alerted his colleagues and followed Kofi into the wild, past dense brush and flowing streams. Finally, they reached a clearing, and John froze. Before them was a mature lion, its golden mane tangled in pain. It dangled from a thick branch, its hind leg ensnared in a cruel trap. Blood trickled down its limb. The lion's roars were laced with agony and defeat. John recognized him. A dominant male, a symbol of power and balance in the ecosystem. His injury could mean disaster for the local wildlife. All around were signs of a fierce struggle. The lion had tried and failed to free itself. John turned to Kofi, who stood nearby, visibly distressed. He made low, empathetic sounds. a reaction John had never seen him show another predator, especially not a lion. John assessed the situation quickly. The trap had done serious damage. They needed to act fast and with utmost care to avoid pushing the wounded lion into further panic. "There's no time to waste. We need to get him down now," John said firmly to his team as they arrived. "Get the snare cutters and the tranquilizer." "Ready." As they prepared the tools, John knelt near the lion, speaking in low, calming tones. He knew the animal was gripped by pain and fear. Kofi remained close, his eyes filled with concern as he quietly watched the wounded lion. When the rescue team returned with the supplies, John moved in with practiced care. He administered a measured dose of tranquilizer to ease the lion into a temporary sleep. Once the lion was fully sedated, the team got to work. Every movement was deliberate. Cutting the snare required precision and steadiness. The rope had tightened, so cruelly that even a small mistake could worsen the injury. John and his colleagues coordinated with calm urgency, gradually loosening the trap's grip. Finally, after a tense stretch, the last strand gave way. The lion lay free. John examined the wounded leg closely. The gash was deep and showed signs of infection. The team moved quickly, cleaning the wound and wrapping it securely. Through it all, Kofi stayed nearby, his gaze never straying from the lion. He watched intently as John treated the injury, his expression a blend of worry and curiosity. When the procedure was over, and the lion lay still but stable, Kofi approached gently and placed a hand on the lion's mane, as if offering comfort. Once the first aid was complete, they carefully transported the lion back to the ranger station, where he would receive the care needed for recovery. John was hopeful. With time and attention, the lion could heal and return to the wild. Back at the station, the lion was placed in a special enclosure where his condition could be closely monitored. John and the team worked in shifts, feeding him, changing bandages, and keeping a constant eye on his progress. What truly surprised John was Kofi's continued concern. Almost daily, Kofi would visit the lion's pen, sitting quietly nearby. At times, he brought branches or wild fruit he had found in the forest, gently placing them near the fence, offerings of peace. John initially worried that Kofi's presence might disturb the lion, but the opposite seemed true. The lion showed no signs of aggression. In fact, he occasionally rubbed his head against the fence in response to Kofi's visits. As days passed, their unlikely bond deepened. Kofi would spend hours watching the lion rest, and the lion seemed to draw calm from the gorilla's steady presence. It was a connection no one could explain, pure, mutual, and instinctive. John and his colleagues were astonished. They had never seen such understanding between two species typically seen as natural foes. They could only guess that Kofi's compassion had driven him to seek help when he sensed the lion's suffering. And now he remained, offering quiet companionship. Weeks went by, and the lion's wound slowly healed. He began to walk again, stronger with each passing day. The time had come to let him go. On a crisp, sunlit morning, John and his team opened the lion's enclosure. The great cat stepped forward, pausing to take in the scent of freedom. His eyes scanned the forest and he seemed to savor the moment. Kofi approached him, touching the lion's leg gently, one final gesture of connection. The lion looked back at Kofi, then nuzzled his head against the gorilla in a silent expression of gratitude. He lifted his head high and released a thunderous roar, the sound rolling through the trees like a final salute. John and the others stood in reverent silence, knowing they had witnessed something rare and extraordinary. The bond between Kofi and the lion had transcended nature's boundaries, becoming a symbol of empathy, resilience, and understanding. As the lion disappeared into the emerald depths of the forest, Kofi remained, watching until the last glimpse of golden fur vanished. Then he turned to John, eyes thoughtful, as if sharing a silent truth known only to them. His eyes shimmered with quiet pride, and John knew Kofi had done something remarkable. He hadn't just helped save a life, he had woven a timeless tale of compassion and unity between species. Deep in the heart of the African sanctuary, a new story had taken root. From that day on, the tale of the courageous black gorilla and the lion he helped rescue spread across the reserve. It became a symbol, a living testament to the power of empathy and the incredible bonds that can form between the most unlikely of creatures. John and Kofi continued their mission, guardians of the forest, always walking side by side. As faithful partners in conservation, they had written an unforgettable chapter in the wild's ongoing story, one that would echo for generations through the trees and hills of the African land they both called home.